The hangar of the Galactic Defense Fleet was alive with noise. Engines roared. Boots clanged against metal floors. Blue lights flashed along the walls as alien warriors prepared for war. Each soldier stood tall and proud, their armor shimmering with the mark of their species, an army known across the stars for brute strength and unbreakable courage. And among them, trying to adjust a chest plate that was too large, stood a human. His name was Eli Vance. Short, slim, and young, he looked more like an engineer than a warrior. The aliens around him, towering reptilians and insectoid fighters, looked down on him with clear amusement. His black hair stuck up from the static of his helmet. The armor plates clinked every time he moved, as if the suit rejected him. One alien, a muscular officer with burning yellow eyes, burst into laughter. "Careful there, little creature," he said, grinning wide enough to reveal a row of sharp teeth. "You might cut yourself on the armor before the enemy even sees you." Another whispered loudly to his squad, "Is this a human they sent us? The apex will eat him first." Eli ignored them. He had learned long ago that silence spoke louder than arguing. He tightened a loose strap and made sure his wrist console worked. In his mind, he repeated what his father had told him before the draft. Humans were never the biggest or the strongest, but we always survive. A horn sounded through the hangar. The giant blast doors opened, revealing the vastness of space. Beyond protective energy shields lay thousands of ships waiting in formation. The Galactic Defense Fleet, the largest Alliance army ever assembled, was about to face the Drakkar Empire, a race of war beasts commanded by a being known only as the Apex Predator. Stories about the Apex Predator were whispered in every corner of the galaxy. They said it was taller than a battle mech and could crush plasma rifles with its claws. Hundreds of fleets had fallen trying to stop him. Some claimed he didn't fight for conquest or power, but out of pure instinct, an urge to hunt anything that dared resist. And now, the fleet was going to war against that nightmare. Eli watched the movement of ships through the viewports. His heart thumped hard, not from fear, but from focus. He had studied the Apex's attacks, read every report, analyzed each pattern. But still, something wasn't right about this war. The Drakkar didn't just destroy, they tested. They waited, like a predator learning how to break its prey. "Recruit Vance." The sharp voice snapped him back. Standing before him was General Vorther, a broad alien whose armor gleamed with silver markings. His skin was covered with ridged scales, his expression carved from stone. "Yes, sir," Eli replied, straightening his posture. Vorther inspected him, as if examining a flawed piece of equipment. "You're the only human in the unit. The Council insists on this diversity initiative. I think it's a waste of rations." "I'll prove they didn't waste their time, sir," Eli said quickly. Vorther's eyes narrowed. "Prove it, then survive." Then he moved on, his heavy footsteps echoing down the line of soldiers. The aliens nearby chuckled again. One leaned toward Eli and muttered, "Don't take it personally. He doesn't like anyone who can't break steel with their bare hands." Eli managed a small smile. "Then it's a good thing I break problems instead." Hours later, the fleet entered hyperspace. The stars stretched into lines as every ship jumped toward the front lines. Inside the barracks, Eli sat on his bunk. The air hummed with tension. Veterans sharpened their blades, some meditated, and others recorded farewell messages. He opened a small hollow photo of Earth. Green forests, blue oceans, clouds curling over continents. No matter how far he was from home, that image reminded him why humans never quit. The other species fought for honor or territory. Humans fought simply because giving up wasn't in their nature. Suddenly, the ship jolted. A deep rumble shook the walls. Red lights flared across the ceiling. The voice of the ship's AI blared through the speakers. "Warning, multiple contact detected. Drakkar fleet. Intercepting ahead of schedule." The entire crew jumped to their stations. Eli grabbed his gear and ran toward the control deck. Outside the viewport, the safe blue glow of hyperspace vanished, revealing a hellish scene. Explosions flared across the void as the front ranks of the fleet were torn apart. Drakkar's ships looked alive, shaped like metallic beasts with wings that shimmered in cosmic fire. They crashed through defense lines as if mocking the Alliance's preparation. Thousands of energy bolts filled space, like angry stars clashing. Eli's commander shouted orders, trying to restore formation, but communication channels were collapsing. Static filled the air. Panic began to ripple across the bridge. As the battle unfolded, something massive appeared behind a Drakkar line, a ship shaped like a spiked crown, the Apex Predator's flagship. It moved silently, its size dwarfing everything else. Even in space, where there was no sound, people swore they could hear it, a low vibration in their bones. Eli's breath caught. The Apex had arrived earlier than predicted by 2 full days. Every calculation, every battle plan collapsed in an instant. General, Eli said loudly, pointing at the tactical display, "We need to pull back to Grid 7. The formation is collapsing toward the—" Vorther cut him off. "Stay silent, human. Leave strategy to soldiers who understand war." But seconds later, the fleet center broke exactly where Eli had warned. Drakkar's ship sliced through the defenses like knives through air. Vorther's jaw tightened. For the first time, his eyes flicked back to the human who had dared to speak. Eli didn't smile. He simply said, "We need to adapt. Now." The chaos outside grew worse. Flashes of explosions, the streaks of burning ships, the faint outlines of enemy creatures boarding vessels, all filled the screen. And somewhere beyond the smoke and wreckage, hidden inside that monstrous flagship, the Apex Predator watched the small human's life sign flicker and refused to fade. For the first time in years, it felt curiosity. In the middle of war, one small human had caught the attention of the galaxy's greatest hunter, and thus began the legend of the smallest soldier who would force the Apex Predator to bow. The space outside the fleet burned like a storm of dying stars. Bright streaks of energy ripped through darkness, each one ending in fire and loss. Ships from 100 worlds tried to hold their lines, but the Drakkar forces tore through them like predators slicing through prey. Inside the command ship, Resolute, alarm screamed. The corridors glowed red as damage reports rolled across the holoscreens. The smell of ozone and burn plating filled the air. Eli Vance ran down the narrow passage toward the engineering deck. The deck shook under his boots as another explosion cracked through the hull. Sparks burst from a vent and showered over him. "Power conduits are down!" shouted one alien engineer, a tall insectoid creature with translucent wings twitching in panic. "The main reactors are collapsing. Defensive shields at 30%. Eli grabbed a glowing cable that was half melted and scanned the readings on his wrist console. "If we lose the primary grid, the bridge will be exposed." The engineer chittered nervously. "Then we will all die, small one." Eli didn't answer. He yanked a side panel open and began rerouting power manually, his fingers working fast across glowing control wires. The alien stared in confusion. You'll fry yourself," one said. "Maybe," Eli muttered, "but it beats being vaporized." Electric arc shot across the panel, biting into his gloves, but he kept working. The energy readings flickered from red to yellow, then to stable blue. The humming of the reactors steadied for the first time in minutes. On the bridge above, every shield on the ship flared back to life. General Vorther's eyes widened. "Who restored power?" "Human engineer," replied a crew officer, disbelief still heavy in her voice. Vorther snorted, but couldn't hide a faint twitch of approval. "Tell him not to die yet. We need him." Down in the engine bay, Eli wiped sweat from his forehead. The crew slowly turned toward him, no longer laughing. For the first time, a few even nodded their heads in quiet respect. The relief lasted barely seconds. The entire ship lurched sideways, throwing everyone to the floor. Outside, a Drakkar boarding craft slammed against their hull like a meteor. The sound echoed through every corridor. "They're boarding!" shouted an officer through the comms. "Enemies on decks 3 and 4. Vorther drew his blade and shouted orders. All warriors, to the inner corridors. Hold the line. Eli grabbed his rifle and helmet, joining a squad gathering near the lower bay. The aliens looked uneasy taking orders beside a human, but at that moment, war didn't care about pride. The corridor lights flickered as the air grew hot. Smoke filled the hall. Then the outer door exploded inward. The first Drakkar soldier stepped through the breach, a monster of armor and claws, standing 3 meters tall. Its skin shimmered like molten glass, glowing veins pulsing with green light. Its roar made the walls shake. The aliens fired, plasma bolts hammering into creature, but it roared again and kept moving. 2 soldiers were thrown backwards, armor shattered. Eli didn't panic. He aimed for creature's joints, the same way he'd studied in battle briefs. 3 fast shots, 1 at the neck plate, 2 beneath the shoulder ridge. The Drakkar froze mid-stride, stumbled, and collapsed against the bulkhead. Silence fell. Smoke curled around a fallen alien beast. Vorther arrived seconds later, weapons still glowing. He stared at the body, then at the small human holding a smoking rifle. You killed a Drakkar soldier. Alone. Eli exhaled. He was big, slow, easy target. The general's mandibles shifted, almost like a smile. I was wrong. You might live after all. Outside, the battle still raged. Through every viewport, ships exploded like fiery constellations. The fleet was losing ground fast. Drakkar vessels were too fast, too smart, their attacks calculating rather than wild. Eli followed Vorther onto the command bridge. Holograms showed red marks spreading to the map, each one another ally destroyed. "We must retreat," said one captain. "No retreat," Vorther growled. "We stand or the entire sector falls." The room went quiet until Eli spoke softly. "Then we need a better plan." Everyone turned. An alien officer sneered. "You think you can outsmart the apex predator human?" Eli met his gaze. "No one said I had to outsmart him. I just have to make him angry." Vorther's eyes glowed faintly. "Explain." Eli pointed to the tactical screen. "The apex is controlling his entire fleet through remote commands. See the signal relay? It's hidden, relaying encrypted jumps from his flagship. If we jam that, even for a minute, their formation will fall apart." The aliens murmured among themselves. It sounded crazy, but the math checked. Vorther leaned forward. "Can you do it?" Eli looked at the power data again. "Maybe, but the relay's too far for regular jammers. We'll need to get closer to the wreck field." "That's suicide," one captain said. "Yeah," Eli answered quietly. "That's why they won't expect it." Moments later, a secondary battle shuttle left the Resolute and plunged through the debris field. Inside sat Eli, Vorther, and a small strike team. Around them, flaming pieces of ships drifted like ghosts. The air hummed, tense and quiet. Eli stared out at the wrecks of both alien and human vessels. "They were laughing at me this morning," he said softly. Vorther grunted. "They still might laugh tomorrow." Eli smiled faintly. "Yeah, but at least they'll have something to laugh about." As they neared the relay signal, the ship's radar blared. Dozens of Drakkar interceptors approached, their wings cutting light into red streaks. "Brace yourselves," shouted Vorther. The shuttle dived among burning debris, weaving through explosions. Eli worked furiously at the console, activating the jammer sequence. Almost done, a plasma bolt slammed into their tail. The shuttle shook violently. Warning lights flooded the cabin. Eli held on, sweat dripping down his neck. "Now!" he yelled, pressing the final code. A blast of blue energy erupted from their ship, spreading like a ripple across space. Every Drakkar vessel within range flickered. Their movements turned chaotic, uncertain. Some even fired on each other in confusion. Back aboard the main fleet, captains shouted in disbelief. "Their command link, it's offline. All ships, fire everything." Vorther ordered through comms. The battle turned. Laser fire filled the void as the galactic fleet pounded the enemy lines. For the first time, the Drakkar broke formation. Eli slumped against the pilot's seat, exhausted but smiling. The jammer burned out, electronics sizzling, but it had worked. Vorther placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. "Not bad, human. You've earned your place among warriors." But as they turned back toward the fleet, a shadow bigger than a moon emerged from hyperspace. The Apex Predator's true flagship, larger, darker, pulsing with red light like a beating heart. Eli's smile faded. He whispered under his breath, "So that was just the first wave?" Vorther stared through the viewport. His voice was almost reverent. He comes. And as the fleet prepared for the next strike, even the stars seemed to dim before the presence of the apex predator. The battlefield drifted in eerie silence after the storm of lasers faded. Broken ships spun slowly through space, their lights flickering like dying stars. The galactic fleet had survived the first attack, but only barely. Inside the main command ship, Resolute, every system flickered. The bridge smelled of smoke and metal dust. Crew members worked in tense silence, patching damaged consoles and sealing atmosphere leaks. Each heartbeat of quiet carried both relief and dread. They all felt it. Something massive was still out there. General Vorther stood near the main viewport, staring into the blackness. He had fought hundreds of campaigns across the galaxy, but never had the void felt so heavy. The smaller Drakkar ships had retreated, forming a dark ring around a single shadow far beyond sensor range. Eli Vance watched the data feed on his wrist screen. "They're not running," he said quietly. "They're waiting." Vorther turned to him. "For what?" Before Eli could answer, every light on the bridge dimmed. The ship's AI voice trembled. Unknown broadcast detected. Source Central Flagship. Then, without warning, every screen in the fleet flickered with static. A deep, resonant voice rolled through the ships, not through speakers, but through every ship hull, vibrating like thunder across metal. It wasn't a sound made for mortal ears. "Warriors of the lesser stars," the voice said, slow and certain. "You fight well yet weakly. You bleed the edge and think yourself strong. But one life among you burns brighter than the rest." Eli froze. He felt every alien stare slowly turn toward him. "Give me the small one," the voice continued. "The human. Surrender him to me, and I will spare your fleet." No one spoke. The air seemed to vanish from the room. On some ships, crews shouted in disbelief. On others, terror spread as rumors shot across the comm channels. The apex predator had singled out the human. "Turn that frequency off." Vorther roared. But even cutting communications did nothing. The voice kept echoing inside their minds, vibrating right through the hull. "One human," the voice whispered now, "or all burn." Alarms whined, sensors spiking from the enemy's massive power readings. The bridge was chaos. Captains began arguing, voices full of fear. "We can't risk annihilation for one soldier," one shouted. "Give him up." Eli stood silently, his fist tightening. Vorther turned toward the arguing officer, eyes glowing with fury. "We do not abandon anyone under my command. You would doom us all for this creature?" The officer spat, pointing at Eli. "He's not even of our kind." Vorther's hand went to his weapon. "Say that again." The officer stepped back, but held his ground. "General, this is suicide. We're outnumbered 20-1. The Alliance expects us to survive, not to die defending one fragile human." Eli took a single step forward. "He's right," he said quietly. "I'm not worth 1,000 lives." Every head turned his way. His voice was steady, eyes unshaken. "If the Apex wants me, then I'll go." Vorther slammed his clawed fist against the wall. "Cowardice." Eli faced him. "No. Strategy. If he's obsessed with me, maybe I can stall him, buy you time. You know we can't fight him head-on yet." The general stared into the human's eyes for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You are smaller than most, but your spirit weighs heavy. I see now why he senses you." The comms crackled again. The apex predator's voice grew sharper. "Decide quickly. My patience feeds on death." Vorther turned away. "Bring up the tactical map. We will not hand him over. If the predator wants him, he must come for him." An uneasy silence followed. Somewhere deep down, even Vorther knew that meant the predator would come, and when it did, entire ships might fall. A few hours later, the fleet floated among the wrecks of the earlier battle. Repairs continued silently. Shadows drifted where the Drakkar had vanished. Everything felt too quiet. Eli sat alone in the observation bay, staring out at the broken stars. He touched the glass and whispered, "What you after?" From behind him, heavy footsteps approached. Vorther stood there holding 2 metal canisters of thick alien rations. Eat. Thinking on an empty stomach is useless. Eli took one with a small smile. Thanks. Didn't expect compassion from you. Compassion? Vorther grunted. Call it practicality. A dead human is of no use to me. They ate in silence for a moment before Eli spoke again. Why would he want me? I didn't do anything extraordinary. Vorther looked out through the glass as a faint light glimmered across the void. Perhaps that is why. True strength rarely announces itself. Eli exhaled slowly. If I could just get close enough to his systems, maybe I could trace his frequencies. We might find the location of his command core. The general frowned. You plan to hunt the apex predator? You are mad. Maybe, Eli said. But if we don't, he'll keep coming world after world. Vorther studied him for a long time, then finally spoke. Then you will have your chance. He will not stop until he finds you. Moments later, the calm shattered. A sudden shudder ran through the entire ship. Crew fell, alarms screamed, and metal screamed as massive claws raked across the outer hull. The flagship! It's right on top of us, a crewman shouted. Outside, the void lit like lightning. The Predator's colossal vessel eclipsed every star, its hull black and alive with pulsing red energy. From its underside, hundreds of Drakkar ships poured out like a swarm of hornets. Before they could react, a blinding beam struck from the flagship, not at their engines, but across open space, creating a shimmering energy rift. And from that glowing tear came a deep, booming voice again. My prey resists. Amusing. The shaking bridge went silent again, everyone frozen. Through the rippling energy veil, a silhouette began to form, tall, broad, crowned with spines. The apex predator had opened a transmission so powerful it created a physical projection in front of every command deck. Eli stepped closer to the holographic image. The creature was colossal, its eyes bright as fire. Every inch of it radiated command and hunger. You fought well, small one. The voice vibrated. But I have ended empires that believe themselves clever. Surrender yourself, and I will honor your bravery. Eli met those burning eyes through projection. So that's your offer. I die, and you leave the universe alone? No, it said simply. I will leave your companions alive. The universe, however, belongs to me. For now, Eli answered. The creature tilted its head, amused. You carry no fear. Maybe I do, Eli said. I just don't show it to bullies. The hologram flickered, its sharp grin fading. Then the voice grew low and dangerous. Then I will come myself. The transmission cut. Every sensor on board screamed at once. Hyperspace anomalies closing fast. Vorther stared at the readings. He's coming here. Eli looked toward the dark space beyond the window, where stars began to blur. Good, he said quietly. I was getting tired of waiting. The void was no longer silent. Every sensor across the fleet screamed as space itself bent and rippled. Lightning-like energy bled across the stars, forming a tunnel of fire. From inside that tunnel, the apex predator's flagship appeared, dark, massive, alive. Every ship in the Alliance seemed like a toy beside it. Bridges across dozens of vessels filled with shocked voices. The Predator had not sent another wave of soldiers. It had come in person. General Vorther's mandibles tightened. Shields to full. Pull civilians back to the moon perimeter. Eli Vance watched the readings on his wrist unit. The energy buildup from the Predator ship could erase half their fleet in one strike. There was no weapon strong enough to stop it. At least, not the way everyone expected. General, he said, stepping forward, we can't outfire it. We'll just melt in its shadow. Do you have an alternative human? Vorther asked, his tone tight with frustration. Eli's gaze turned toward the cracked moon rotating below them. A pale, broken rock with streaks of glowing silver beneath its surface. That moon has a molten magnetic core. You can see it in the scans. If we overload its field at the right moment, we could turn it into a giant EMP bomb. The bridge fell silent. One alien captain hissed in disbelief. You mean destroy the moon? Eli nodded slowly. Yes. The shockwave would disable every ship within range, including the Predators. Another officer growled, "That's madness. Our fleet will be caught in it." Eli smiled faintly. "Then we don't stay in range." He zoomed the holographic map, fingers moving with confidence. "If we lure the Predator close, then pull the main fleet just beyond the blast radius. The explosion will trap him and give us enough time to retreat or strike while he's blind." Vorther crossed his arms. "You seem certain?" "I'm not certain," Eli said, "but it's better than waiting to die." The general studied the hologram, then looked up at the human. "You remind me of the old tacticians from legend. Wild ideas, impossible odds." After a pause, he added, "Prepare your plan." Hours later, space was dark again, calm but tense. The fleet scattered into position behind the damaged moon. The plan was simple but deadly. Fake retreat, draw Predator pursuit plant charges, and ignite the magnetic core from inside. In the cargo bay, Eli loaded heavy power canisters onto a small strike shuttle. "I thought humans fear death," one alien soldier murmured. Eli tightened the strap and grinned. "Only when it's boring." Vorther approached in full armor, his tall frame casting a long shadow. "You lead the insertion. I'll cover from orbit." "That's new," Eli said, half smiling. "You actually sound worried." The general bared his teeth in a way that might have been a smile, only about wasted potential. The shuttle launched. It streaked across the wreck-filled field toward the broken moon. Below, the surface glowed faintly, veins of molten silver running through rock like burning rivers. Every tremor from deep inside sounded like a heartbeat. "Approaching Fisher T7, Eli reported. "Confirmed," replied Vorther over the comm. "Drakkar patrols circling above. You have 6 minutes before they spot you." Eli guided the shuttle lower. The moon's gravity barely held, pulling them onto jagged terrain. When they landed, dust rose in slow motion. He stepped out, carrying 2 explosive cores across the uneven ground. The horizon shone with faint star fire. Beyond it, the Predator's flagship moved closer, casting a red glow over the ruined surface. His breathing echoed inside the helmet. He could almost feel the Predator out there, watching, curious. He reached the fissure, dropped to one knee, and began connecting cables. The magnetic reading spiked on his visor, planting the first charge. A growl cracked over the comm line. "Vance, incoming flyers," Vorther warned. Eli jerked his head up. 3 Drakkar drones swept down to the dust clouds, claws extended. He dove aside as blaster fire melted the rock where he had stood, rolling behind a boulder. He raised his rifle and fired 2 quick bursts. One drone exploded instantly. The second swerved. He hit the third in the wing, sending it spinning into the fissure. The remaining one circled back. Eli aimed, fired, missed. Before it could strike, a beam from orbit speared downward, slicing the drone apart. Vorther's voice rumbled in his earpiece. "Consider that covering fire." Eli laughed and pressed the detonator to arm. "Much appreciated." He sprinted to the second fissure, dragging the linking cable through the dust. His hands shook. He was working on borrowed minutes. In the distance, space burned red. The Predator's ship descending slowly, pulling the moon in its gravitational field like prey caught in claws. The moon's magnetic current vibrated stronger. Every instrument screamed that it was ready to collapse. "Charges set," Eli said, returning to shuttle. "Be fast," Vorther answered. "He's moving closer." Inside the massive enemy flagship, the apex Predator stood on its obsidian deck, watching the tiny shuttle move across the moon. The creature's eyes glowed bright against the darkness. "He makes the stone bleed," it murmured to itself, intrigued. "The small one believes he can wound a god." A second, smaller Drakkar raised its head. "Shall I end him, Lord?" "No," the Predator replied. "Let him finish." A smart hunter watches a trap before breaking it. Eli climbed into the shuttle, chest heaving, sweat dripping into his eyes. He looked at the timer. 1 minute left until detonation. He powered the engines, lifting from the moon's surface. Through the viewport, the planet's cracks began to glow like lava veins. "Fleet, pull back!" he shouted. Vorther's command echoed throughout every ship. Engines roared to full thrust as vessels turned hard away from the moon. But the Apex flagship followed, lowering closer, its shadow swallowing the crater. Eli bit his lip. "Almost there, come on." The timer reached 0. The moon erupted. A silent wave of white light expanded outward, pure energy ripping through matter and metal. For one frozen moment, the entire universe seemed to flash. Then everything went dark. The blast punched through the Apex flagship, shaking it violently. Systems shorted, lights snuffed out. Across the Drakkar fleet, ships drifted helplessly, their engines dead. Aboard the Resolute, alarms burst again, not in fear, but disbelief. "It worked!" one officer shouted. "The Drakkar network is down." Vorther slammed his claws on the console. Attack before they recover. For the Alliance. The fleet surged forward, their surviving guns blazing. Eli's shuttle twisted through debris, barely functional. Static filled his comms, but he could still hear distant cheers. He smiled weakly. "Told you it would work," he muttered. Then the cockpit shook again. He looked out and froze. From the crater below, something enormous began to move, wings tearing free from molten rock, eyes glowing behind clouds of debris. The flagship had survived, though scarred and cracked, and from its core emerged a single figure surrounded by fire. It was the Apex Predator, alive, furious, and now descending straight toward the tiny human who had wounded his pride. Flames rolled across the ruined moon as fragments of molten rock drifted into orbit. The surface rippled with glowing cracks like red rivers. From one of those cracks, the Apex Predator rose, enormous, its armor half melted yet shining with terrible power. Each step left footprints of fire. Eli Vance's small shuttle spun in the drifting dust above the crater. Inside, alarms blared and warning lights painted his face orange. Half his consoles were dead, the rest blinking yellow. He steadied his breath. "So you survived," he whispered. Outside, the Predator stretched massive wings lined with metal scales and launched upward, fast as a comet. The shock wave hurled the shuttle sideways. Eli fought the controls just long enough to crash land on a rocky plain. Metal groaned. Smoke filled the cabin. He forced the hatch open and staggered out, rifle in hand. Above him, the sky glowed red from the burning debris field. The moon's gravity pulled slowly, making his movements heavy but dreamlike. Then the air changed, silent, thick. Something massive landed behind him. The ground shook. Eli turned. The Apex Predator stood there, nearly 5 times his height. Its armor glistened with liquid metal. Its eyes burned with a cold intelligence that didn't belong to beasts. Its claws unfolded like blades, but it did not strike. Human. It rumbled, voice layered like thunder through stone. "You ruined my fleet. You fractured a world. Tell me why you still breathe." Eli tightened his grip on the rifle. "Because I haven't finished the job." The creature tilted its head, studying him. "Your courage masks ignorance. Do you think strength is born from rebellion?" Eli shook his head. "No. Strength comes from choice. You hunt because you can. I fight because I must." The Predator walked in a slow circle around him. Each step left glowing dust swirling in the weak gravity. "Your words, small but heavy. The others of your kind run. You stand." "Why?" "Because someone has to," Eli said simply. His mind raced, searching for anything tactical in the terrain. Behind him lay the wreck of his shuttle. On the right, jagged spines of metal stuck out from the ground like crystal knives. The Predator crouched low until its burning eyes were level with Eli's. "You are the first prey to wound me." It raised one claw hand, showing deep scars still smoking from the explosion. "Tell me your name so I can carve it into what remains of your homeworld." "Eli Vance." "Ali Vance," the creature repeated slowly, the sound of it echoing like a spell. "Then let the end of your story begin." It struck. The ground shattered where the blow landed. Eli rolled aside just in time, feeling the heat of impact. He jumped his feet, firing 3 quick shots. The bolts glanced off the creature's shoulder armor, leaving sparks. The Predator charged again. Eli dug between two rocks. A claw tore through one, splitting it like paper. The brute's strength was overwhelming, but Eli's size gave him the only advantage, movement. He sprinted toward the jagged field of spines. Behind him came the thundering footfalls of the apex predator. Dust rose with each tremor. The smaller human ducked under a curved plate of scrap, sliding across the ground. He fired a short burst at the spine's base. The shot triggered a cascade of metal shards erupting upward. For a second, the spikes trapped the predator like chains. It snarled, tearing through them, shards slicing across its armor. Eli used the brief moment to run toward the crashed shuttle. He knew one of the magnetic control cells inside still held charge. If he could overload it, he might create a field strong enough to stun even that monster. He tore open a hatch and wrenched the glowing power cell free. Its hum vibrated through his chest. One overload would be lethal this close. But staying alive wasn't the goal anymore. Ending the fight was. He turned back just as the apex predator burst free from the wrecked spines, coughing steam and fury. "You think to end me with your toys?" it bellowed. Eli gritted his teeth. "I think I'll try." He ran straight toward the giant. The predator lunged as if to crush him, but Eli dug beneath its arm and slammed the magnetic cell against its chest armor. The device clamped on automatically. The predator grabbed him instantly, claws curling around his waist and lifting him from the ground. The two locked eyes, one radiant with monstrous rage, the other calm with defiant focus. "What have you done, insect?" "Just match frequencies," Eli said, pressing his wrist console. A blinding blue pulse erupted between them. The shockwave blew both backward. The predator roared, its armor flickering with disrupted energy fields. Lightning arced across his body, forcing it to kneel. Elias hit the ground hard, rolling until his vision blurred. When he finally pushed himself up, his hands trembled. The massive figure still moved in the distance, struggling to rise. He spoke aloud, half to himself. "Still not enough, huh?" The creature managed to stand again, slower now, breathing heavily. "You fight as if your death sings to you," it growled. "Such madness belongs only to predators." Eli wiped blood from the corner of his mouth. "Then maybe you're not alone anymore." They charged one last time, human and alien colliding under the red glow of the fractured moon. Eli ducked aside, fired into a gap in the predator's shoulder, spun, and grabbed a piece of cracked piping, striking at exposed wiring glowing under armor plates. The creature's roar shook the valley, but Eli's blow connected with a spark that sent arcs of light rippling through its torso. The massive form stumbled, claws digging into the ground to stay upright. For a second, neither moved. Breath steamed in the air. The predator looked down at him, not with hatred now, but something else. Respect. "No one has ever made me kneel," it said quietly. Eli lowered his weapon, chest heaving. "Then take a moment to rest. You've earned it." With a weary, proud growl, the apex collapsed forward, one knee hitting the scorched ground. The noise echoed through space like distant thunder. Around them, the Drakkar fleet, still half disabled, hesitated. Their sensors registered the impossible image, their god leader on one knee before a human. Eli stared at the giant's bowed head. A strange wave of sorrow washed over him. He didn't hate the creature anymore. For all its fury, the predator had been exactly what it claimed, a hunter following its nature. Still, he whispered, "Stay down." The predator's voice came faint but clear. "Finish me." Eli shook his head. "No, we both proved enough." The creature let out a low, rumbling breath that could have been laughter or pain. "Then go, small one. Carry that defiance until even your stars grow cold." Eli looked up through the thin clouds of dust. The fleet's rescue lights were descending, cautious, shining against the broken moon. He backed away slowly from the wounded giant, eyes never leaving its burning gaze. The predator watched him until he vanished into the shimmer of the landing craft. Above, the stars flickered back through the ash. The battle was ending, and across every surviving ship, one image repeated. The moment the apex predator bowed to the smallest human, the shattered moon drifted in silence. Smoke and dust floated through low gravity like mist, glowing faintly in reflected starlight. Every starship in range held position. No one fired. No one moved. It was as if the entire battlefield waited to understand what it had just witnessed. Down on the surface, the apex predator still knelt, hulking form crackling with fading energy discharges. Around him, molten stone cooled to black glass. The once terrible roar of his breathing had softened into a steady, deep rhythm, almost peaceful. Above that broken plane, a rescue shuttle descended. Its blue landing light spilled across the rocks like falling rain. Inside, General Vorther stood by the open door, armored chest rising and falling as he watched the view below. His expression carried none of his usual steel. It was wonder and confusion. Of all endings, he murmured, I never thought I would see this. The shuttle touched down. Dust spiraled up through the landing beams. When the hatch opened, Eli Van stepped out, limping slightly but alive. The windless air made his voice sound small inside his helmet. General, good to see you. Vorther strode toward him, stopping when they stood side by side, gazing at the immense figure kneeling ahead. You did what no fleet could. You stopped him. Eli shook his head. I only showed him something different. Maybe that's what he was looking for. The predator lifted his head at the sound of their voices. His eyes glowed faint red, but the hatred was gone. Instead, there was something ancient and heavy, like the weight of understanding. He spoke, voice softer, almost human. You fight with mind and fire. You do not kill from hunger. You protect because you choose. Eli nodded slowly. That's what being human means. We're all small, but we decide what small can do. The predator bowed his head lower, one clawed hand pressing into the scorched ground. Every sensor feed from above captured that moment. The galaxy's most feared being lowering itself before a human. Then I call you kin, the predator said, words resonating like distant drums. The hunt is ended. Vorther took a slow step forward, disbelief giving way to quiet respect. Around him, the soldiers who had once mocked the tiny human now watched in awe. Some instinct deeper than pride made them lower their own heads. The movement spread like a ripple, one species after another bowing in silence. Eli simply stood there, awkward and surprised. You really don't have to. Vorther touched his shoulder. Let them. Even legends need truth to end them. A few hours later, aboard the flagship Resolute, the medbay hummed softly with machinery. Eli sat on a cot, one arm wrapped in bandages, ribs bruised. Outside the transparent wall, the fleet reorganized. The Drakkar ships, leaderless but not destroyed, drifted slowly away into dark space. None pursued, none attacked. Vorther entered, carrying a small data slab. Command is calling you Commander Vance now. They are rewriting entire tactical manuals after what you did. Eli tried to sit straighter and winced. I still don't know if I won or just survived. You changed something far greater than victory, Vorther answered, setting the slab down. The Drakkar follow strength above all. To them, seeing their god kneel means their war is over. Eli looked out the viewport at the scattered debris glinting around the moon. Good. Maybe now we all get to breathe. The general's eyes narrowed, metallic lids reflecting faint light. He will live. You know this. I know. Eli smiled faintly. And that's fine. Some enemies you kill, others you learn from. Later, when the fleet gathered for departure, a message pulsed through open space frequencies. It carried neither code nor coordinates, just sound. To the warriors who face me, the small one stands among you. Protect him, for he carries a flame that even predators bow to. It was the apex predator's voice. No threat, no growl, just recognition. The signal looped once, then vanished forever into cosmic static. Every bridge of every ship played the transmission. Silence followed it, heavy and proud. Crews stared at each other, uncertain whether to celebrate or pray. Eli heard the broadcast from inside the shuttle bay. He leaned against a railing, watching the moon shrink beyond the window. Guess he meant it, he said softly. Vorther's deep laugh rolled from behind him. Do humans always turn their enemies into storytellers? Only the interesting ones, Eli replied. When the fleet finally returned to Allied space, the human became more than a name in reports. Stories spread faster than light. How a fragile being from a small planet had forced the galaxy's apex hunter to bow. Pilots repeated it as superstition. Never mock a human. They make the impossible polite. Months later, under a quiet sky back on Earth, Eli stood on a coastal cliff where waves struck black stone. The sea air was cold, full of salt and peace. He wore no armor now, only a plain jacket with faded patches. Beside him lay a small metal fragment cut from the Predator's ruined claw, its surface etched with alien runes. He turned it over in his hand, remembering that final moment on the moon, the heat, the silence, the respect. Behind him, he heard boots on gravel. Vorther's voice rumbled softly through a translator. You could have stayed in command. Why come back to this quiet world? Eli smiled off toward the horizon. Because I finally remembered what we fight for. It was never victory. It's the right to choose our tomorrow. Vorther stood beside him, silent for a time. Then, surprisingly, he removed his polished gauntlet and pressed it against his chest in a gesture of honor. The smallest warrior, he said, taught the galaxy that courage does not ask permission to exist. Eli looked down at the metal shard one last time. And the greatest predator learned how to show mercy. He placed a fragment on a stone and stepped back, leaving it glimmering under sunlight. The waves crashed. Wind pressed against his face. Above, the first stars appeared, those same distant fires that had once watched him stand small against an empire. He spoke almost himself. They laughed at the small human until the apex predator bowed. Vorther turned his face to the sky, and in that bow, every kind found a mirror. The two stood watching the horizon until it faded into night. For the first time in living memory, there was no war waiting between the stars. Only stories of what courage could be. High above a quiet planet, new ships orbited in peacekeeping formation. Mixes of alien metal and human design. And written across their hulls in both languages was a single name, Project Kin. Eli smiled when he saw it. The name said everything. Kin, not master, not prey. Just equals. And somewhere far across the galaxy, in a world of eternal dusk, a colossal shape knelt before an empty sky. The apex predator pressed one massive claw into the dust, remembering the battle and the small creature who had made him question what strength truly meant. Till the stars fade, he whispered, the small one remains. Then he stood, turned toward the endless dark, and walked away, no longer as a god of war, but as the keeper of a promise.